So, all right, so we're teaching through the book of Daniel. So before I get out of chapter 4, I want to address a huge topic that's right here as the chapter begins. We've been in this chapter for 2 weeks. We'll wrap it up today with a third topic. Next week we'll be in chapter 5, and that'll be a lot of fun. But you know, when you look in chapter 4, and listen, I read a lot of books. I use about, 30, 40 resources when I teach through a book of the Bible. So, and a lot of people don't even address this. And yet, when you read the Bible and you write down all of your observations, you have to write this observation down, and that is Nebuchadnezzar is sharing his personal testimony. This is personal evangelism. And I think I might have touched on that briefly a couple of weeks ago. But you could actually read the chapter and never think about it if you do not stop and think. But if you were to write down 20 or 25 observations, you would probably eventually see that. So he shares his testimony following his conversion. And here's what I want you to notice. It came normally. It was natural. It was organic. How many of y'all are into organic food? Oh, look at you. We got maybe 5 people or so. That's good. Hey, you know what? It's funny when you get into, I don't know all about regulations, government regulations, but for instance, okay, so my daughter Heather, she gets whole milk, from a cow, all right? Now, I might not get this exactly right, but here's the deal. I think the state law is that's illegal unless you buy part of the cow. So then you have to buy part of the cow. So in other words, there is a regulation that keeps you from drinking organic, natural milk straight from the cow. It's like, that's weird, isn't it? But I'm not going to get into all that. But anyway, but organic. Because people like stuff, they don't want all the GMOs, HMOs, CMOs, or whatever's in all that stuff. They just want it nice and pure and all that. And so organic is in. But here's what I know. Everybody in this room is already a personal evangelist. You are. People say, well, I don't know what to say. No, that is not true. I've personally advertised for Toyota. You have? Did you get paid for it? No, they didn't send me a check. I have a Toyota. We drive a Toyota. I don't. I'd rather drive my truck, but we do have a Toyota. Savannah's got a Toyota. Heather has a Toyota. Adam has a Toyota. Gabe didn't get a Toyota, but, we're working on it. And my daughter Rachel used to have a Toyota. But what I'm saying is, so I like Toyotas. I talk about Toyotas. How did you do that? You didn't know anything about Toyotas? No. All I know is I love my Toyota. Had no problems, reliable, and that's it. So, that's all I got. So all I'm saying, look, we're already personal evangelists. Somebody asked me one time, seriously, said, well, does Starbucks pay you? Because I have mentioned Starbucks before. No, but they should. But, all I'm saying, it just comes normal, natural. See, we're already, everybody in here is a personal evangelist. You are. You probably did personal evangelism this week for somebody. Target, television show, movie at the theater, Wonder Woman. I'm not going to go watch it, but somebody in here probably will. I don't know. Or I don't even know when it comes out, if it's out. I don't have any idea, But here's what I know. When you read Acts chapter 1, verse 8, the Bible says you will receive power and you're going to be my witnesses. It's just going to happen. It's just what you will do. All the way to the end of there. So God has distributed his people throughout the world. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Tonight you watch the NBA Finals, they're on the basketball court. They are. We have people playing basketball tonight in the finals, and they are personal evangelism. They do personal evangelism for Christ. They do. We've got football players. They do too. I mean, you know, I know sometimes you think, where are all these people? They're out there. They're out there. You're out there. People walk by you. They don't know. They don't. All right. And during the course of the week, most of us will spend time at work, school, or somewhere, wherever we spend the majority of the time. And for Nebuchadnezzar, his world of influence was his kingdom. He was the king. All right? So he sends a letter to the entire kingdom to share his personal testimony, because that was his influence. Now, like if you were the CEO of a company maybe, or maybe you're just, you know, you work around two people. That's it. Okay, that's your world, or what have you. Reaching two is probably easier than reaching 2,000. I mean, unless you write a letter or have a microphone. And obviously his realm of influence is larger than ours, but let's not forget Daniel. See, I think what you might not remember is his conversion started probably at least 2 decades earlier, when Daniel was taken captive, ripped from his home country, and brought to Babylon to serve in the kingdom. So, and if you were to go through the book of Daniel and just write down his personal evangelistic tactics, that would be helpful. Just do what Daniel did. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But here's what happens. We're all okay with God calling us, you might say. We're excited from the get-go, and we're just like Moses in Exodus chapter 3. Here I am, until you get the assignment. You know what I mean? Oh. Okay, for instance, what if we said, okay, next week, the church, the school's got this big bash on Saturday night. I'm just making this up. And we're not going to have time to clean up, so can you get a crew together? Yeah, we'll give you free rent, but y'all clean up, and then, yeah, we'll do that. So I'll raise up. Everybody raises their hand. So you show up next week. And then I say, okay, I need you 4 to go clean the bathrooms. Probably not as excited, right? Are you with me? Not as excited. Why couldn't I get mopping the floor or something? Why, I don't do toilets. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. So Moses gets the assignment in verse 10. So God says, come, I'll send you to Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world. Now, I want you to get this. I've been watching sheep for 40 years. And now you want me to go talk to Pharaoh. Go figure. And here's what I want you to tell him, because I want you to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Okay, so you're leading sheep for 40 years. You really hadn't talked to many people. I mean, sheep. You've just been talking to sheep. Okay, but now you got to go to Pharaoh, the most powerful horse, and you got to go in there and say, hey, Pharaoh, you need to let Israel go. How you feeling about that assignment? Like, it ain't happening. And Moses came up with all of these excuses. And you can read Exodus chapter 3. And Moses is right. He wasn't qualified. Moses had no experience dealing with world leaders. He had none. He had been talking to sheep. Well, how do I start off the conversation with Pharaoh? He had no idea. But here's what God told him, Moses, your doubts are irrelevant. They are. God said, you're right, you can't, but I can. So basically what I'm saying is, all of your doubts and excuses and inabilities and qualifications, they don't matter. They don't matter. Like Toyota. I don't have much technical knowledge about a Toyota. I am simply a satisfied customer. That's all I am. That's all I am. I've been driving Ford pickups since I was, I've been in Ford pickups since I was 16. Now, if you think about it, since I was 16, so for over 40 years, I've been driving a Ford truck. I've never had one that needed a major repair outside tires and brakes and new batteries. That's all. Nothing major that I can think of. Nothing. Pretty satisfied customer. You know? That's all I am. I don't know. I'm not a mechanic. I know nothing about anything. I don't. I'm just a satisfied customer. It's not that complicated. So here's what I want to do. I thought, well, this morning, then, let's just talk about 3 habits. All right? And at the end, I'm going to narrow it down to 2, but we're going to start with 3. And so Jesus said in Matthew chapter 18, Matthew 28, he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Because of that, as you go through life, he goes on in verse 19, as you go through life, I want you to be engaged in personal evangelism. So number 1, here we are. Here's the 3 habits. Daniel chapter 1. I get this out of verse 8. Now, I want you to understand. You have been taken into exile. You're brought to Babylon. You are a foreigner. How much clout do you have with the people on Nebuchadnezzar's staff when you show up in Babylon? How much clout do you have? 0. Are you with me? 0. So Daniel, it says in verse 8, resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. So he asked the chief of the eunuchs, or the chief of staff, to allow him not to defile himself. I don't know how quickly that happened. Maybe it was within the first week or 2, but I know this. You don't just ask somebody that. They just laugh at you because you're nothing to them. Daniel must have built some kind of relationship with this guy. If you read on in chapter 1, what Daniel proposes, if it doesn't work, the guy in charge is the one who's going to get executed, not Daniel. So you're going to have to develop some kind of a relationship with people, perhaps before you share your testimony. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar, he's the king, so he had a relationship with the people in his kingdom. And so here's the deal. I'm not asking you today to do anything uncomfortable. Nothing. I'm not asking you to walk up to a total stranger. I'm not asking you to do that. All right? I'm not saying you can't, but that's probably not your style. Probably not your style. So in chapter 2, Daniel continues to build this relationship with the king, and he interprets this dream. He's building some credibility, he's building trust, and all that. Now, Nebuchadnezzar's not changing, but Daniel just keeps sowing the seed, investing, and building the relationship. And over time, the king knew Daniel very well. And in fact, when we get to chapter 4, where we find Nebuchadnezzar's testimony, here's what he says about Daniel. At last, Daniel came in before me. He's the guy I named Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him the dream. See, they had built such a relationship that Nebuchadnezzar knew that Daniel walked the talk. But they had a relationship been going on for a couple of decades now. And Daniel had built a solid testimony and reputation with the king. And that's all you do is you go through life. You build relationships, you build your testimony, you build trust, you build your reputation. That's all. Now here's the deal. Like if you were to show up for work 18 minutes late every day, I mean, look, I don't care. I mean, you lose a little credibility. Look, I've worked in the, construction. We all, listen, let me tell you something. People are probably talking about you, okay? Now, you may not know that, but they do. We had iron workers. You know what? They wouldn't show up if they didn't see the crane moving because all they wanted to do was hang iron, all right? They didn't want to drag deck. They didn't want to weld bridge and all that other stuff that you do. And when they didn't show up, we talked about them. We said, they didn't see the crane moving. They're not coming. They probably drove by the job. See, I'm just saying. If you have bad work habits, people are probably talking about you. And the best way to do is have good, solid work habits, work ethics, and have credibility in your testimony. All right, then number 2, you look for open windows. That's all. You look for an opportunity to share something. And look, listen, it's helpful to share something spiritual, if you will, early on. Now, otherwise people might misjudge your intentions. Okay, for instance, I mean, it's a little bit different as a pastor sometimes, only because, okay, so I know this guy, and he said, it was a couple years before I knew you were even a pastor. Well, part of that, I'm just careful. I mean, a lot of people know right away, but I'm always aware of the fact that some people think, oh, I'm just a project. You really don't like me. You don't care about me. I'm just a project. Now, that mentality's out there too. That's why you have to build a relationship. And even after a while, that can get dicey. I understand all that. I get that. But you're going to have to figure that out and look for open windows. Now, here's the deal. What did Daniel use in chapter 1? His diet. His diet. That was his opportunity to share something on the spiritual side. That's all he did. Let me give you an illustration. Okay, so I'm watching the NBA Finals, all right? I don't know. Anybody else watching it? I know this is a football crowd, but that's okay. Okay, so let me give you an illustration and to illustrate what I mean about sharing something spiritual. Okay, so Thursday night, the game came on at 9 p.m. That means it goes off after 11:30. Well, I meet with guys at Panera Bread at 6:30. So I'm not getting much sleep. So I told Phil last week, I said, well, I won't be getting much sleep on Thursday night. And he said, well, you think we ought to just not meet or whatever? No, I'll be there. Okay. Now, let's suppose I show up on the construction site. And I'm like, man, I'm dragging a little bit today. Man, why are you dragging? Well, I had to watch the game last night, and then I had to meet with my small group this morning. Now, all I'm doing, I'm not doing anything, am I? All I'm doing is sharing something organically, naturally. I'm not inviting them to church. I'm not saying anything. I am just breaking the ice, let them know that I have some spiritual commitments. You see what I'm saying? Daniel used his diet. You can't use basketball because you're not watching the game. But, but if you need one, you say, okay, this week, or tonight it starts at 8, goes off at 10:30. You could use it tonight, okay? So tomorrow. I don't know how you want to use it. I'm just saying look for a way to organically share that you do have some spiritual commitments. That's all. It's not, I know we make this way, 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 way harder and all that. And don't force it. It's just not, it just won't feel right. But that would not feel weird. I wouldn't feel weird saying that at all right? I knew a pastor years ago in Jacksonville, and his son was on a football team, and he was actually a punter, by the way. And he would fly home from the games because he had to fly a few hundred miles so he could be in the pulpit on Sunday morning. Now, his point was not his commitment to preaching. I got that. No. But he communicated that family was important. You see what I'm saying? That was just natural. All I'm saying is we find ways all the time to talk about things, and it comes naturally. All right? And what's important. So find things, look for open windows, and just share something. That's all. Now, in Daniel chapter 4, and here's what makes it sometimes hard. We don't like sharing things that are uncomfortable. And you may not, all right? And then that's fine. But Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, he said, Nebuchadnezzar, here it is, man. You either repent of your pride or it's not good. It's not going to be good. Now, most people feel odd saying John 14:6, where Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Ooh, that's pretty narrow. Yeah, it is. You know, everybody likes to talk about the Sermon on the Mount, do they not? Everybody loves the Sermon on the Mount. Oh, until you get to the end, remember? Oh, we don't talk about the end. Because Jesus said a lot of great things. Oh, but we don't talk about the end of his message where he says, narrow is the way and few there be that find it. Oh, we don't talk about that part of the Sermon on the Mount. Okay. And if you're not comfortable, that's fine, and it's not mandatory, but there may be an opportunity to do that. I don't know how you feel. Sometimes I don't mind. I don't know. I don't want to use the wrong language here, but sometimes I get a little ticked off at guys, all right? And so I don't mind sometimes saying something like Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, you may not feel comfortable doing that, but if you want to talk to somebody, Colossians 4, continue steadfastly in prayer, listen, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. And Paul said, pray for me too, that God will open doors, give us windows of opportunity for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I'm in prison, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to speak. Hey, you can give people a book. I've given people a copy. It's a little small booklet on the purpose-driven life. It's the first chapter of Rick Warren's book. But there's a lot of good stuff out there that you could say, well, I'll just give it to somebody, and so on. And I know guys tell me they don't read, which is foreign to me because I devour a few dozen books a year, but most people still read on the internet, sports stories or something. So people probably read more than they think. And Jesus said in Luke 19, here was an open window. He saw Zacchaeus in the tree, and he said, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Listen, if people weren't lost, Jesus never would have come. Simple as that. James 1:5, if you lack wisdom, ask God who gives generously. So every morning pray, open windows, wisdom, all of that. Well, 1 Peter 3:15 talks about being prepared. Question, how are you getting better prepared to organically share your testimony? Be prepared. Be prepared. Listen, not everybody will appreciate your testimony, your faith. In sports world, and I know we get into pro sports, it's a little bit different, but it's still there. And I don't know how many of you have heard the name, but the best shooter in basketball is a Christ follower, Steph Curry. So Nike came to him, wanted to do a shoe deal, because Nike likes to make money. So who do you go see? The best shooter in basketball. And Steph Curry says, well, I'd like to put some scripture verses on the shoe. Nike says, we're out. All right. Steph said, I'm not budging. Fine. Won't do the shoe deal. Well, Under Armour came along and I think they inked like a $200 million deal, all right? Because Under Armour wants to make money too. You can put that scripture on there all day long. We're making money, we're happy. You know what I'm saying? Well, what I'm saying, and here's the deal. There are people in pro basketball, they're not fond of Steph Curry. Now, and I'm just telling you, this is a fact. And one basketball player said, well, look, here's the deal. You know, Steph Curry's kind of religious. He's not running around with 15 other women. You know, he doesn't play with an edge on the court, like always wanting to get into a fight and all that. So what they're saying is, nah, he's just not our cup of tea. See, it's just so, but listen, when you walk with Christ, it changes your demeanor. It does. And there are people who do not like certain players because of that. David Robinson, who no longer plays, same thing happened to him. He was a Christ follower. But on the floor, he was so humble and quiet, but boy, could he play basketball. I'm just saying. And a lot of guys in the pro basketball world didn't like that because their lifestyles are way different. They like the macho, rough, running around, all that stuff, and it's just hard to get through that. All I'm saying is, listen, so if the best shooter in basketball, hey, the quarterback for the Redskins, Kirk Cousins, I mean, listen, hey, he is big time into personal evangelism. Now, you would never know that watching him play football. Oh, he is. He is a flat-out, ardent witness for Christ. Big time. All right? I'm just saying, people are out there. But there are people, they just don't like Christianity. All right? All I'm saying, don't make that bother you. All right. So I've given you 2 habits, but here's the deal. Let's just say, oh, I just don't feel comfortable saying anything. Okay, but you have invested in the relationship like Daniel did. Okay, you don't want to make you don't want to share anything. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to grade on a curve today. We're going to throw out habit number 2 if that was too hard. You know what I mean? As the professor, that was too hard. So all we're going to do, we're going to just stick with the first and third habit. We're going to go down to just 2 habits. 2. All right, so you've invested time in a relationship. Now let's go to the third habit, which is for some of you will be habit number 2, and these are the only 2 that are absolute must. All right, you do have to build relationships. And number 2, you have to make the invitation. All right? So you have to invest and invite. That's the third or the second habit. Daniel said to the king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Now he went on and said, break off your sins. And, you know, he went on, but he's making an invitation. And it's a good time to remind ourselves that, and as we have said about Nebuchadnezzar, even people at the top have their fears, do they not? They do. And don't assume that somebody's going to say no. Let them say no. Just ask them. And I cannot, I've often said there are great times of the year to invite, and listen, I think any week's a good time. I do. I mean, I've shared a little bit. I mean, I had a guy come last Memorial Day weekend, not this year, but last Memorial Day weekend. Okay, that's a holiday weekend. You say, well, that's not a really good weekend for me to invite somebody. Okay, well, this guy said yes last year on Memorial Day weekend. I don't know when they're going to come. On Easter, and I don't know how you did on Easter. Boy, I could bomb out on invitations. I can get no. I can get it as well as you can. But I invited 16 people on Easter and 8 came. Now, I don't know how many you got to invite. I can invite 16 and nobody comes, but I knew I had to invite as many as I could if I wanted to get somebody to come. So it just takes a lot. I know that. But here's what I know. We have made inviting somebody to church or sharing our faith this gut-wrenching event. We break out in a cold sweat, don't we? I couldn't do it. Okay. Got to slow down and just be normal. Just be normal. I was going to talk about Starbucks. I couldn't do it. I couldn't talk about Starbucks. Just couldn't do it. But here's what I think has happened. You have heard this a lot in society. Oh, my faith is personal. That came from Satan. Didn't come out of the Bible. What did Jesus say? No, your faith is public. It's going to be so public that when I send you around the world, you're just going to organically become witnesses for me. It's public. It's not private. That private thing, you know what? We have a lot of cliches that sound good, but they're way, way off from the truth. Way, way off from the truth. And so we have made it a gut-wrenching event. So if you go to the theater this afternoon, tomorrow, is it a gut-wrenching event to tell somebody what movie, when you go to work tomorrow, to tell somebody about the movie? Well, I was going to tell you about the movie. I went and saw it a month ago, but I didn't want to say anything. I was just too nervous to say anything about the movie. That's weird. I'm just saying, we just made it where it's this gut-wrenching event. So start off just going a little slower. Don't rush into it. Take your time. Make it more normal. More normal. Because believe it or not, there are people out there who believe the Bible is relevant. They just don't know how or why. I was on a job years ago in Oakton, Virginia. And an engineer came out to the job and he says, hey, I heard you've been studying the Bible. I'd like to talk to you a little bit. I'm like, well, I didn't even know the guy. I just thought, well, that's pretty cool. Here's a guy, doesn't do church, and he believes that there is something in the Bible that's relevant to something that's going on in his life. You don't know who you're going to run into, who you're going to have contact with. Anyway, you think it's more, okay, I don't know what your experience is. I'll tell you my experience. You think it's more peaceful if you don't say anything. I don't think it is. You think it's gut-wrenching to say something? When I miss an opportunity, that is a gut-wrenching experience. It is. It wasn't more peaceful for me to say nothing. And so I try to be aware of open doors, take an opportunity, and all that. So here's what I want you to do. I gave you a handout in your bulletin, and I didn't get one, but I kind of know what's on there. And so I thought, well, I'll just give you a handout. Now, here's the deal, and I mean, this is a good tool. It's a good thing to have. And he talks about listing 10 names. Okay, we'll start with 2, all right, or 3. But, you know, it's not bad to have 10. I mean, because when I invited for Easter, I had to have more than 2, all right? So, but what I'm saying is, you just write down the names of people. Now, that card is kind of self-explanatory. There's a lot of good stuff on there. And once again, this guy's got he's older now, and he did this years ago, but anyway, it's still a good card. This is just a businessman who happened to be a Christian, and this is just something his company put out. I mean, he didn't do church work or whatever. This was created by a guy in the business world, well known in the business world. All right? And so this is what he found to be helpful, and I think it's helpful too. Because I'm telling you, folks, people don't do this. They don't. Christians don't do this. I know a pastor in a church of over 1,000. I said, hey, tell me a little bit about your personal evangelism. Here's what he said. I don't do any. Okay? He doesn't have to. Well, I shouldn't say that. I traveled the country for a year with an evangelist. Not one time. You know, we went into a town, I had to go out, I knocked on doors, I did stuff all day long, every day. He never went out. In a year, I never saw him talk to one person about Jesus. Oh, he's the evangelist. He just showed up and preached at nighttime. He didn't do anything during the daytime. Now, I don't know everybody. All I'm saying is, you know, we've got a Bible. We've got the example of Jesus. We've got tons of encouragement and exhortations. And there are a lot of people not involved, not praying for lost people and inviting people. And it's just really two things, two habits, and that is like people enough to invest time with them, and then at the appropriate time, invite them to come to church. That's it. Two habits. And for you, those who like to live on the edge, 3 habits. You can actually share something. Share your testimony. Let's stand for prayer, shall we?